Greetings everyone, this is David Fulmer back with Fiction Shop and a little segment I call 3 questions. And in this segment it's going to be 3 questions about plot structure. Question number 1. Is it necessary for me to storyboard my entire narrative in advance? The short answer is no. I do suggest that for any narrative of length, not necessarily for a short story, but if you're working on a book like narrative, fiction or nonfiction, that you do a storyboard. Now, you can storyboard as little or as much as you want. Some people do storyboard the entire narrative, beginning to end, however many pages that may be, 300 pages. Some people do it a little bit at a time. Now, I will tell you the way that I work, and I did mention this in the segment, the plot structure segment, but I'm going to revisit that. What I do is I will write a scene, and then I will make my storyboard card. And then I will write another scene, make the storyboard card, and after I've got a few, then I'll put them up on the board. So I'm actually doing storyboarding after the fact, but it still gives me the same sort of overall view as I'm building my story up on the wall. It's giving me that view of my story scene by scene, so you can do it as little or as much as you want, but I really highly recommend that you do a storyboard. It's so helpful in keeping track of your narrative when it's a book like narrative, fiction or nonfiction. Question number 2, is there a rule regarding the length of the acts? The answer to that is also no, a qualified no. We did talk about first act, second act, third act, and I again recommend that we stick to some version of that in fiction and narrative nonfiction, beginning, middle, and end. Now, if you're writing a script, they are very strict about the length of the acts, and in general it breaks down to a quarter, a half a quarter. So if it's a 2-hour movie and it's a minute per page, it's 30 pages, 60 pages, 30 pages, and at the end of that 30 pages or around there someplace, you're going to want to end your first act. But that's a screenplay. When we're writing fiction and narrative nonfiction, we have a lot more leeway. So I find, though, that a general, very general rule of a quarter, a half a quarter will help you at least, get oriented. And I found out that without really planning it, if I'm writing a book that's 300 pages, for instance, somewhere between 60 and 80 pages, I'm going to reach that plot point at the end of Act 1. Don't ask me how that happens. It's just, maybe it's subconscious. I don't think that you should go beyond, if it's, again, let's use 300 pages. I don't think you should go beyond maybe 80 or 80 pages, 90 at the most, for that first act. Okay, and because your readers, again, this is DNA. This is kind of an instinct. It's that we're sort of timing out this way. If you go on too long with your first act, your readers are going to get bored. Say, when are we going to get into the complications? So I use that as a general guide rule. Second act, same thing, somewhere in the very general area of sort of half of your book. But a second act will often go on further than, what would it be for 300 pages, 225 pages, probably somewhere anywhere from 225 to 250 pages, you can be jumping into your third act. So use that as a general rule of thumb, but be mindful of it, that it's beginning, middle, and end, and you want to have a nice rhythm and balance to your acts. Question number 3, what's the difference between the climax and the conclusion? This confuses a lot of people, and it also confuses people that somehow they've got it in their heads that the climax or the conclusion is that plot point at the end of the third act, and that's not it. Your third act is your resolution. The climax is the very final moment when everything is resolved. Well, not everything, but your main plot is resolved. Your subplots don't need to be resolved, but that main plot needs to be resolved in some way. The dramatic question needs to be answered. The climax. It is very near to the end. Because if it's not, what are you going to do for the rest of those pages? So the conclusion is the wrap-up. At least by my definition. So I will have the climax of my book, one of my books, 5 to 7 pages from the end. Those last 5 to 7 pages are housekeeping, cleaning up details, and so forth. Now, if you find yourself going on and on and on after the climax and the conclusion's taking forever, you know what that is? That's your next book.